Far and far away from each other in two different hemispheres, the two countries are already grabbing the headlines for different reasons. One is a sand-covered Arab nation dominated by Wahhabi fundamentalism under an absolute dictatorial system of ruling. The other is a tropical South American country governed as a constitutional republic currently ruled by an elected leftist government. Despite them both existing on almost two different planets, one common fact places them both at the top of the United States foreign policy: oil. Both nations are famous for owning two of the biggest repositories of oil in the world. Caracas, January the 10th, 2019. Minutes after Venezuelan President-elect Nicolas Maduro Moros took the oath as President of Venezuela, his government faced a rare political phenomenon. Juan Gerardo Guaido Marquez, the President of the National Assembly of Venezuela, declared himself as the President of Venezuela.
I swear to formally assume the powers of the national executive as the president in charge of Venezuela.
The elected government under Maduro was swift to state that the crisis is a coup d'etat led by the United States to topple the legitimate government and control the country's oil reserves.
Estamos muy cerca del cambio gracias a la ayuda de la comunidad internacional, de los Estados Unidos, el Grupo de Lima, Colombia, Brasil y los israelitas que nos están apoyando también.
139 sovereign state members of the United Nations did not recognize Guaido as the legitimate president of Venezuela, as the country's Supreme Tribunal of Justice announced that Guaido's claim was unconstitutional. However, that didn't stop Washington and several European countries to back Guaido, waging an all-out political, media and economic war on Venezuela. They claimed that they are all defending democracy and the people's demand for change.
This attempt at regime change by the United States has been couched in terms of the restoration of democracy, in inverted commas, and concerns about the humanitarian situation in Venezuela, but this is completely hypocritical. Anytime that the United States imperialism wants to intervene in a country, they always work out a justification.
White House took the lead and the European Union rallied behind Washington, slamming Caracas for what it labelled as undermining democracy and the rule of law. A new wave of cyber attacks and industrial sabotage sourced from outside Venezuela plunged the oil-rich nation into total chaos and misery. In a high-risk gamble, Trump threatened Venezuela with the threat of direct military intervention.
And we believe that the Venezuelan military and its leadership have a vital role to play in this process. If you choose this path, you have the opportunity to help forge a safe and prosperous future for all of the people of Venezuela. Or you can choose the second path, continuing to support Maduro. If you choose this path, you will find no safe harbor, no easy exit, and no way out. You will lose everything.
Yes, you heard it right. Trump lectured Venezuelans on the fight for what he calls democracy. He is the very same person with love affairs with the regime, practically ruled by one of the world's most notorious enemies of democracy, Saudi Arabia.
It's a great honor to have the Crown Prince with us. Saudi Arabia has been a very great friend. We've become very good friends over a fairly short period of time. I was in Saudi Arabia in May.
Trump is not alone in such an absurd comedy. Just hours were needed before the European Union issued a statement backing Guaido. In an official declaration by the High Representative on behalf of the EU on the situation in Venezuela, EU countries voiced their full support for Guaido's camp, labelling it as the democratic and legitimate body of Venezuela. The Union, which posed as a hero in shining armour, defending what it calls Venezuelans' democratic rights, is the same body which has the closest political and financial relations with Saudi tyrants. Four EU countries are among the top 10 exporters to Saudi Arabia. The bloc, as a whole, accounts for nearly a quarter of imports into the country. The EU reported $21 billion worth of Saudi imports in 2017.
When you got a major international financial company, want to take everything from Venezuela, like they done in any country, I mean, all the wars in Africa are because in Africa they got all the mineral resource, right? And they want war there in order to control. So when you got a weak country, you can take over. Maduro tried to defend this country, and what he got.
And in reality, this shows that they do not really care about democracy or human rights or humanitarian concerns. All they care is about the policies, about installing governments that are compliant with their foreign interests, and above all, governments that give an open rein to exploitation of their natural resources.
When it comes to arms sales, orders of Saudi weapons also have a significant impact on other EU countries' weapons industries. Trump says the people of Venezuela are standing for freedom and democracy, and the United States of America are standing right by their side. And Antonio Tajani, the head of the EU Parliament, talks of not abandoning Venezuela's people. What about Saudi Arabia's oppressed people, gentlemen?
What to do about Venezuela? The European Parliament has approved a resolution with the support of Conservatives and Liberals, 310 votes in favour coming overall. But for the first time, the Socialist group abstained.
The resolution condemns what it calls repression against politicians and journalists, and calling for more and harsher sanctions against Maduro's elected government. There has been no single EU vote on a practical step against the Saudi regime's grim human rights violations inside the kingdom. Venezuela seems to be another classic example of abusing human rights causes for political gains. Does the US government actually oppose dictatorships and champion democracy around the world, as we are repeatedly told? Does the EU really care about the fate of activists and journalists voicing out loud to defend democratic values?
In reality, they don't care about democracy or the lack of democracy. What they worry is about the interests of the multinational companies in their countries. And they're quite happy to support dictatorships in other parts of the world, like as we were talking in Saudi Arabia, as long as these dictatorships follow the interests of the multinationals and follow the interests of purchasing weapons from these countries.